There are stories whispered in candlelight, stories the stone walls of ancient cathedrals seem to keep for themselves, stories about a woman draped in darkness, standing silently in the corners of Europe's oldest shrines. Her face is black, her gaze unyielding, and yet she is called the Mother of Light. They call her the Black Madonna. For centuries she has watched over pilgrims who kneel before her, their hands trembling, their prayers urgent. She has been carried through wars, hidden from conquerors, and venerated by generations who could not explain her origin, yet felt her presence deeply. Her skin, carved or painted in black, is not an accident of smoke or time. It is deliberate, powerful, unsettling. There are hundreds of her across Europe, France, Spain, Poland, Italy, each with its own legend, each with miracles tied to her name. And yet, for all her sacred presence, for all the centuries of devotion, the Vatican remains silent. No doctrine, no clarification, no official explanation. Only silence. Why does the Church avoid her story? What truth hides behind her darkened face? Is she a symbol of forgotten faith, a relic of ancient goddesses, or a reflection of what the Virgin Mary might truly have looked like before the image of holiness was painted white? Art historians offer one answer, theologians another. But beneath their words lingers something deeper, something older than Christianity itself, a current of mystery that defies reason. Some say she is the keeper of lost knowledge, a bridge between heaven and earth, between the sacred and the forbidden. And then there are those who believe she holds the memory of a world that existed before the Church's story began. A world where the divine was feminine, dark, fertile, powerful, where creation was born not from light alone, but from the womb of shadow. If you travel across Europe, you can still find her, standing in dim chapels or carved into the rock of forgotten sanctuaries. Her eyes meet yours with a question no sermon dares to answer. Who is she really? And what does her silence reveal about the faith that tried to bury her? Tonight, we will enter that silence. We will walk through the centuries, tracing her journey through history, art, and faith. We will seek the truth behind her black face and the secrets the Vatican never explained. This is not just a story about religion. It is a story about power, identity, and the mystery that refuses to die. This is the story of the Black Madonna and the silence that has lasted for nearly 1,000 years. When the first pilgrims entered the dim sanctuary of Rocamadour, they carried torches that burned low against the damp air of the cliffs. The smoke coiled through the shadows, licking the ancient stones that had heard centuries of whispered prayers. And there, at the center of that silence, stood the statue. Her face was black as midnight, her robe carved in tones that swallowed the light, her eyes carved with a calm that seemed to watch through time. The pilgrims fell to their knees, not out of fear, but awe. They did not understand who she was, yet they knew she was holy. They called her Our Lady. They called her the Black Madonna. No one remembered who had placed her there. Some said the statue was discovered deep inside the rock, as if the mountain itself had given birth to her. Others said she had fallen from the heavens, an image sent by God to mark a sacred place. The Church offered no clear explanation. The priests bowed before her, but spoke of her origins in careful words, never too certain, never too bold. The mystery became her power. As centuries passed, other Black Madonnas appeared. In the Pyrenees, in the hills of Italy, in the plains of Poland, each with the same darkened face, each radiating the same solemn majesty. People came to her with illnesses, with fear, with broken hopes. They came because stories said her eyes could heal, her hands could protect, her silence could hear every unspoken prayer. Her darkness, rather than frightening them, comforted them. But her presence stirred questions. Why was she black? Was it smoke from centuries of candles? Or was it something deeper, something chosen? The official word was simple: soot, time, pigment. Yet those who stood before her felt that the darkness was intentional, a message carved in color. Black was not decay, it was origin. It was the color of the earth from which all life began. The church did not deny her, but neither did it embrace her. She was allowed to exist, but only in the margins of faith. Pilgrimages continued. Miracles were reported. Yet the Vatican said little, as if silence itself were a doctrine. In the grand halls of Rome, where theology turned mysteries into categories, the Black Madonna remained unnamed. For some believers, she became more than the Virgin Mary. She was the mother of all creation, the bridge between the divine and the human. For others, she was a dangerous relic of an older faith, a shadow of the pagan goddesses that Christianity had conquered but never fully erased. The color black carried echoes of the past that the church wanted to forget. Still, the people refused to forget. They sang to her in Latin and in the dialects of forgotten villages. They carried her image through fields and battlefields. When plagues came, they turned to her. When kings went to war, they carried her emblem for protection. When the world grew cold and faith was tested, her image, dark and steadfast, remained. In the 13th century, chroniclers wrote of statues that bled when struck, of faces that wept during famine, of idols that refused to burn. Some believed these were signs of her power, others called them superstition. Yet whether miracle or myth, the stories spread. And with every retelling, the mystery deepened. The Black Madonna was no longer just a statue. She became a question carved in stone. Each pilgrim who knelt before her was forced to confront the tension between what was sacred and what was forbidden. Her skin, the color of night, stood against the pale images that filled cathedrals. It was as if she were whispering from another world, reminding them that holiness was not the property of one color or one culture. Artists painted her. Poets wrote of her. Theologians debated her. Some saw her as a symbol of humility, others as the embodiment of divine femininity. Yet through all these interpretations, the Vatican remained curiously still. The silence of the Church became as much a mystery as the statues themselves. What were they afraid of? That acknowledging her would unravel the image of purity they had crafted for centuries? That the faithful might see in her not a relic, but a truth that contradicted the official image of the Virgin Mary? Or was it that she represented a power the Church could not control? A reminder that the sacred once had a darker, older face. If you walk into a small church in Provence today, you might still find her standing behind glass. The candles at her feet burn low. The tourists take pictures, unsure whether to be reverent or curious. The locals bow their heads, whispering prayers their ancestors once spoke in secret. Her eyes, carved of ancient wood, still hold that same knowing calm. The Black Madonna does not explain herself. She does not need to. Her silence is her language. Her color is her revelation. And perhaps that is why she endures when so many other icons have faded. Because she does not demand belief. She invites contemplation. She does not promise light. She teaches that even in darkness, the divine can dwell. This is where our journey begins, not in the grandeur of cathedrals, but in the quiet shadows where faith was born, before doctrine, before dogma, before the world decided what holiness should look like. The story of the Black Madonna begins not with clarity, but with mystery, and it is in that mystery that her truth still breathes. The Middle Ages were not kind to certainty. It was a world haunted by fear and faith in equal measure, a world where miracles and madness often shared the same breath. The Church towered over kingdoms, its bells echoing across fields and mountains, yet beyond its walls the unknown still ruled. Superstition lived in every shadow, and the people of Europe were hungry for signs from heaven. It was in this world that the Black Madonna walked into history. By the 12th century, pilgrims were speaking of statues of the Virgin Mary with darkened faces appearing in remote sanctuaries. Some were said to have been found buried in the earth, uncovered by shepherds, or by the hooves of animals that refused to move until the ground was dug open. Others were discovered in caves, shining faintly by torchlight, as if the stone itself had protected them from centuries of oblivion. The Church rarely confirmed these stories, but it did not deny them either. Silence, again, became a form of permission. At Rocamadour, at Chartres, at Montserrat, at Einsiedeln, the stories multiplied. Each shrine claimed its own miracle. In one tale, villagers tried to move the statue to a grander church, but each night she returned to her original place. In another, flames consumed the building around her, yet her figure remained untouched. The faithful whispered that she chose where she wished to stand, that no human hand could command her. As these legends spread, her reputation grew. Pilgrims traveled across mountains and seas to touch the hem of her robes. Kings and queens sent offerings of gold. Soldiers prayed to her before battle. Mothers named their children after her. Merchants carried her small images on long journeys. The Black Madonna became a companion to all who lived with uncertainty. Her darkness was no longer a question. It was a comfort, a sign that she belonged not to the powerful but to the humble. In France, her shrines became places of refuge during times of plague. In Spain, her image was carried through the streets when storms threatened to destroy the harvest. In Poland, she became the protector of an entire nation. And yet, in Rome, her existence was barely acknowledged. Official texts spoke of the Virgin Mary in radiant whiteness and golden light. The darker counterpart remained hidden behind the walls of distant sanctuaries. Theologians began to argue among themselves. Some claimed that the statues were dark because of candle smoke, that their pigment had changed with time. Others said the color was chosen to reflect the words of Scripture, "I am black but beautiful." It was a phrase from the Song of Songs that many believed to symbolize divine mystery. But few dared to say aloud that perhaps the Virgin herself might have been of darker skin, a woman of the Middle East, not the pale ideal painted by European artists. To suggest such a thing in the Middle Ages was dangerous. The image of Mary was not just religious, it was political. She represented purity, civilization, and the moral order of Christendom. A Black Madonna, unaligned with these ideals, disturbed that image. Her existence questioned the very narrative of what holiness looked like. So the Church stayed silent. It did not destroy her shrines, for the people's devotion was too strong. But it did not celebrate her either. She was allowed to exist, but not to speak. Still, she spoke through those who believed. The pilgrims told stories of visions and dreams. In them, the Black Madonna appeared as a woman of immense strength, her voice gentle but commanding, her eyes filled with sorrow for a world that had forgotten its origins. Some said she came to remind them that the divine was not distant, not a cold light above, but a presence born from the earth itself. Monks recorded these accounts in Latin manuscripts, often hiding them within larger volumes of accepted theology. In some monasteries, her image was painted on the margins of illuminated texts, small but defiant. The brushstrokes were dark, deliberate, and reverent. These artists knew what they were doing. They were preserving a truth that could not be preached openly. Meanwhile, the Black Madonna's sanctuaries became centers of pilgrimage that rivaled even Rome. In Rocamadour, the steep path that led to her chapel became known as the Stairway of Redemption. Pilgrims climbed it on their knees, leaving behind tokens of their sins. At Montserrat, monks told of heavenly music that filled the air at night. In Chartres, where the great cathedral rose like a mountain of stone and glass, a hidden crypt beneath held one of the oldest Black Madonnas in Europe. The faithful said she had been there before the cathedral was built, before the church itself took form. Her presence in these ancient places hinted at something older than Christianity. Some whispered that the statues were carved from pagan idols, reshaped and baptized to fit the new faith. Others claimed that the early Christians had adopted symbols from mother goddesses to make the new religion more familiar. Isis with her child Horus, Cybele holding her infant, Artemis of Ephesus, all transformed into the Virgin and Child. The Black Madonna was the living echo of this transformation, a bridge between the old world and the new. This possibility frightened the clergy. To admit that her image carried the shadow of pre-Christian worship would be to acknowledge that the Church had not replaced the ancient gods, only renamed them. And so the silence continued, guarded by doctrine, defended by ignorance. Yet the people understood her in their own way. They did not need theologians to explain why they felt peace in her presence. They saw her as the mother who had endured suffering, who understood loss, who stood with those forgotten by the world. In her darkness they saw the color of the soil that fed their crops, the night that gave them rest, the mystery that made life sacred. The Middle Ages produced countless saints and relics, but few inspired such quiet, enduring devotion. The Black Madonna did not ask for crusades. She did not promise victory. She offered something far more human, the assurance that divinity could exist in imperfection, in grief, in shadow. By the 15th century, she had become part of the landscape of European faith. Her images adorned small roadside chapels, mountain caves, and the corners of grand cathedrals. But the questions remained unanswered. Where had she come from? Why was she different? And why, when the Church claimed to possess the truth of all things, did it still refuse to speak of her? The answer was buried beneath centuries of politics and fear. To understand it, one must go further back, into the roots of the sacred feminine, into the time before Christianity, when gods and goddesses shared the same breath and the color. Black was not sin, but creation. The trail of the Black Madonna through the Middle Ages is more than a history of statues. It is the story of a symbol that refused to die. A symbol that survived fire, war, and silence. A symbol that carried with it a memory the Church could not erase. The footprints of darkness were not signs of evil. They were traces of origin, reminders that even in the age of faith, the divine still had secrets the light could not reveal. Long before the first church bell rang, before the cross became the symbol of salvation, people worshipped the earth itself. They prayed to rivers and mountains, to stars and storms. Above all, they prayed to the Mother. In every ancient land, the divine was not distant or male. It was a woman, vast and unending, the source of birth and death, light and darkness. She had many names and many faces, but her essence was one. She was life itself. When Christianity began to spread through the Roman Empire, it did not arrive in a vacuum. It entered a world already filled with temples and gods that had watched over humanity for thousands of years. Among these ancient deities, the mother goddesses stood tallest. In Egypt, there was Isis, the weeping mother who cradled her son, Horus, the savior child. In Asia Minor, there was Cybele, the great mother of mountains and beasts. In Greece, Demeter and Artemis guarded fertility and birth. In Rome, their images stood in marble, bronze, and gold, their eyes dark with knowing. The early Christians saw these figures everywhere. When they spoke of the Virgin Mary, their listeners already knew what a divine mother looked like. The Church, whether it admitted it or not, inherited a memory older than its own scriptures. The mother and the child were not new symbols. They were echoes of something ancient that could not be erased. Archaeologists have found small statues of mothers nursing infants dating back to prehistoric times. The figures are dark, often made from black stone, obsidian, or clay. Their bodies are full, their faces serene. They were kept in homes, placed in graves, and buried in fields to ensure fertility. The color black, to those ancient people, was not death. It was the color of fertile soil, of rain-soaked earth, of the night from which the sun was reborn. This idea survived the fall of empires and the rise of new faiths. When Christian artists began to depict Mary, they borrowed from what they knew. The pose of the Black Madonna holding her child mirrors the statues of Isis and Horus almost exactly. Even the folds of her robe, the crown upon her head, and the way her gaze looks downward in quiet authority carry the same spirit. Yet something happened as Christianity grew stronger. The Church sought to separate itself from the world it had replaced. The ancient goddesses were declared demons or forgotten myths. Temples were torn down or transformed into churches. Their statues were destroyed or hidden. But memory is harder to kill than stone. In villages and valleys far from Rome, the people remembered the mother who had once ruled the seasons. They whispered her name under the shadow of the new faith. In some places, the transformation was gentle. The goddess simply changed her name. In Ephesus, where Artemis had once been worshipped, a shrine to Mary soon rose. In Egypt, where Isis had ruled, the early Christians prayed to the Virgin in the same language, using the same hymns. The Church claimed victory, but in truth, it had absorbed what it could not erase. The mother remained, cloaked now in Christian garments, but carrying her ancient power within. The Black Madonna stands as the clearest reminder of this inheritance. Her darkness is not only the soot of candles or the pigment of an artist's brush. It is the echo of the earth goddess, the reflection of that prehistoric truth that creation begins in the dark. In the womb, in the soil, in the void before light, there is life. The Church taught that God said, "Let there be light," but even that story begins with darkness. The Black Madonna embodies that forgotten beginning. Scholars who have studied her image often point to this continuity. They note that many of her oldest shrines stand on sites that were once sacred to pagan mothers. Montserrat, for example, means the serrated mountain. But long before Christianity, it was a place where the Iberians offered prayers to their earth goddess. Chartres Cathedral was built over a druidic sanctuary where women once gathered to honor the power of fertility. At these places, the stones remember. When the Church built over them, it believed it was replacing superstition with truth. But perhaps it was simply translating an older language into a new one. The people did not see contradiction. They felt that the divine mother of the old world had found a new name, and they continued to seek her blessing. In their hearts, she was not erased. She was reborn. There is a legend that in the early days of Christianity, when missionaries entered pagan lands, they found statues of dark goddesses and painted them lighter to match the image of the Virgin Mary they carried. Yet in some cases, the pigment would fade or darken again, as if the goddess refused to surrender her true color. Whether or not this story is literal, it speaks to a deeper truth. The divine feminine has always resisted confinement. She cannot be turned to stone or reduced to doctrine. She survives in whatever form humanity gives her. In medieval writings, a few mystics dared to speak of the feminine side of God. They described wisdom, or Sophia, as a woman clothed in shadow, present at creation, guiding all life. Their visions often mirrored the imagery of the Black Madonna, a divine mother who contains both light and dark within her. For these thinkers, the darkness was not a flaw, it was completeness. To deny it was to deny half of creation. But such ideas were dangerous. The Church was built upon hierarchy, upon order, upon control. The notion that divinity might be both male and female threatened that balance. The Black Madonna, whether consciously or not, carried that threat in her silence. She stood as a symbol of what the Church had buried, a reminder that the sacred was once embodied in women, in the soil, in the color of the night. Some historians believe this is why the Vatican never offered an official explanation for her. To define her would be to acknowledge her origins, and to acknowledge her origins would be to admit that Christianity's roots were entangled with the very faiths it condemned. So the Church let her remain mysterious, a relic of devotion that could not be erased but could be left unexplained. Yet for the faithful who knelt before her, the mystery was enough. They did not need theology to tell them what they felt. The presence of the Black Madonna reminded them of something instinctive, something older than Scripture. She was not only Mary, the mother of Christ. She was the memory of the world's first mother, the one who gave life before names and dogmas existed. Her statues, carved from dark wood or black stone, radiate that truth even now. When you stand before one, you can sense the weight of ages in her silence. She carries the voices of countless women forgotten by history, the prayers of farmers and midwives, of those who lived close to the earth. Her blackness is not a mystery to be solved. It is a story to be remembered. The ancient shadow before Christianity never disappeared. It was woven into the fabric of faith, disguised, sanctified, but never destroyed. The Black Madonna is that shadow made visible, a quiet witness to the continuity of the sacred feminine. Her darkness tells us that not all that is holy shines, and not all that is divine seeks to be seen. She stands between worlds, between the gods that were and the God that is, reminding us that the roots of belief sink deep into the oldest soil of the human soul. Color has always carried meaning far beyond the surface of sight. To ancient eyes, colors were not mere shades but signs of divine truth. Gold meant eternity, blue meant heaven, red meant life and sacrifice. Yet black stood apart. To some, it was the color of mourning and death. To others, it was the color of birth, the soil, the mystery from which everything begins. When we look upon the Black Madonna, we are not only seeing pigment, we are seeing the oldest symbol in human consciousness, the darkness that both conceals and creates. The Church often described God as light. The Scriptures spoke of divine illumination, of revelation as brightness breaking through the shadow. Artists followed this theology with golden halos and radiant skies. But behind that imagery lies an older truth. Light cannot exist without darkness. Creation begins not in the blaze of day, but in the quiet void of night. Genesis itself begins with a sentence often overlooked. and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Before God spoke light into being, there was already something vast, silent, and black. The Black Madonna embodies that primal darkness. Her color is not the absence of light, but its womb. It is the place from which light is born. In her, the divine becomes cyclical, not linear. She reminds the faithful that illumination is not permanent, that it fades and returns, that death and rebirth are one. This is why her presence feels both comforting and unsettling. She is the mother who nurtures, but also the mother who buries. Her darkness embraces all. Throughout history, people have tried to explain her color in simple terms: soot, age, artistic choice, smoke from candles. Yet these answers miss the deeper question. Why would so many artists, across centuries and nations, repeatedly choose to represent the Mother of God in black? Why did pilgrims, upon seeing her dark face, feel awe rather than confusion? The reason lies in the symbolic language of the sacred. In ancient cultures, black was the color of transformation. The soil that looks dead after the harvest is black, yet within it seeds wait for spring. The night sky is black, yet from it come the stars. In Egyptian belief, the god Osiris was called the Black One, not because he was sinister, but because he represented fertility and resurrection. The Nile's annual flood left behind dark silt that nourished the land. To the Egyptians, the blackness was life. In many African and Middle Eastern traditions, blackness symbolized potential, depth, and the hidden power of creation. When Christianity spread, these meanings did not disappear. They lingered in art, in folk belief, in the imagination of those who lived close to nature. The Black Madonna became the Christian continuation of this understanding. Her color told a truth that words could not, that holiness dwells not only in light, but in shadow. The people who worshipped her may not have been scholars, but they felt instinctively that her darkness carried blessing. They prayed to her not to escape their suffering, but to find meaning within it. Theologians later struggled with this imagery. In medieval Europe, blackness was often linked with sin, ignorance, and the unknown. White symbolized purity, black the absence of grace. To see the Virgin depicted in black contradicted these associations. And yet, the faithful kept coming. They knelt before her, not despite her darkness, but because of it. She represented a side of the divine that the Church rarely acknowledged: compassion that understands pain, love that grows from loss, faith that survives the night. Artists continued to paint her in this way. Some used black pigment to show humility, to emphasize her humanity. Others chose it to mark mystery, to depict the unseeable nature of God. In many Black Madonnas, the skin of the child Jesus is also dark, suggesting that divinity itself shares in that hiddenness. These were not accidents. They were acts of reverence, deliberate and profound. The Renaissance would later turn toward clarity and light, banishing shadow from the sacred. The Virgin's skin became pale, her features idealized, her eyes lifted toward heaven. The Church embraced this vision of perfection, clean and controlled. But the Black Madonna remained outside that order. Her color defied the aesthetic of purity. She was raw, earthly, untamed. Where the White Madonna belonged to altars of marble, the Black one belonged to caves, to forests, to the hearts of those who lived on the edge of society. This division mirrors a deeper truth about humanity's relationship with the divine. The Church sought transcendence, to rise above the world, to escape flesh and soil. The Black Madonna offered the opposite. She drew worshippers downward into the mystery of being alive. Her blackness said, Holiness is not elsewhere. It is here, in the dirt, in the body, in the struggle. She sanctified what theology often rejected. Modern scholars have rediscovered this idea. Psychologists like Carl Jung saw the Black Madonna as an archetype of the dark feminine, the hidden side of the human psyche that must be integrated for wholeness. Jung wrote that without confronting the darkness within ourselves, we remain fragmented. The Black Madonna, he said, symbolizes that necessary descent into shadow. She invites humanity to accept the totality of its nature, to find divinity not in denial, but in embrace. For mystics, her blackness holds an even deeper message. It is the color of the unmanifest, the state before creation. In mystical theology, God's essence is beyond comprehension, beyond vision. To approach that mystery is to enter darkness. The great mystic John of the Cross called it the dark night of the soul. The Black Madonna is that darkness personified. She is the silence before revelation, the space where transformation happens. Her color also speaks politically and culturally. In a world that for centuries associated whiteness with divinity and authority, the Black Madonna stands as a quiet rebellion. She tells another story of holiness, one that includes all shades of humanity. For people of color, for the poor, for those pushed aside by power, she is a mirror of dignity. She declares that the sacred does not belong to the conqueror, but to the created. When pilgrims kneel before her, they are not only seeking miracles, they are confronting mystery. The black face staring back at them refuses to be simplified. It holds sorrow and wisdom, beginning and end. It tells them that the divine is not light conquering darkness, but light born from it. That truth is both ancient and revolutionary. In a sense, the Church's silence about her makes her message even stronger. Without explanation, she remains open, speaking directly to the heart. Her color becomes a language older than words. It is a theology written in shade and shadow. When the candles flicker in front of her, the darkness of her face seems to move, alive with depth. The faithful say she listens. Perhaps she does. Her silence feels like understanding, her blackness like embrace. She does not shine, she absorbs. And in that absorption she gives back something more lasting than light. The mystery of the black color is the mystery of faith itself. To believe is to stand before what we cannot see and feel that it sees us. The Black Madonna teaches that the path to illumination passes through shadow, that redemption begins in the dark. She does not erase the night. She blesses it. Her color, ancient and enduring, continues to defy the boundaries of theology and art. It invites us to remember what humanity once knew instinctively, that every beginning is born in darkness, and that even the blackest depths hold the promise of dawn. Across the mountains and valleys of Europe, where history breathes through stone and mist, there are places where the Black Madonna still reigns. To follow her path is to walk through the living memory of faith itself. Pilgrims have crossed continents to kneel before her. Kings and peasants, soldiers and mystics, all came to seek something they could not name, but felt in their bones. The journey through these sacred lands is not only physical, it is a descent into the shared soul of humanity. One of the most famous shrines lies high in the mountains of Catalonia, in Spain. Montserrat? The mountain itself seems otherworldly, its peaks shaped like ancient fingers reaching toward heaven. Hidden among them, in a monastery founded nearly 1,000 years ago, rests La Moreneta, the little dark one. Her wooden face glows in candlelight, her eyes deep and distant. Legend says she was found in a cave, shining with light that led shepherds to her presence. The monks who tried to move her statue down to the valley discovered she would not budge. It was as if she had chosen her own home, high among the clouds, between earth and sky. For centuries, pilgrims have climbed to Montserrat to see her. Some come seeking healing, others come in gratitude, but many come simply to feel the silence that surrounds her. It is said that when one stands before her, time slows. The air itself grows thick, as if the mountain breathes with her. Even the skeptic finds it hard to explain why her gaze feels alive. The Church calls her Our Lady of Montserrat, patroness of Catalonia, but to the people she is more than that. She is the heart of the mountain, the soul of Spain's faith, a guardian older than the monastery that houses her. From Spain, the road leads northward through forests and rivers into the heart of France. In the Auvergne region lies a small town called Le Puy-en-Velay. There stands another Black Madonna, known as Notre-Dame du Puy. Her history reaches back to the earliest centuries of Christianity. Pilgrims on their way to Santiago de Compostela once began their journey there, seeking her blessing before crossing the Pyrenees. They believed she protected travelers and interceded for the lost. The cathedral that shelters her sites on a volcanic rock, rising like a natural altar above the town. Even today, those who climb its ancient steps feel the weight of centuries pressing gently upon them. In Le Puy, local legends tell that the Virgin appeared to a sick woman on the mountain and healed her. In gratitude, the woman built a chapel, and soon the pilgrims began to come. Over time, the Black Madonna became not only a miracle worker, but a companion for the weary. Her dark face seemed to understand fatigue and suffering. Her silence promised not escape, but endurance. When plague or war ravaged the land, people lit candles before her image, whispering prayers into the smoky air. The statues have changed over time, rebuilt after fires or revolutions, yet the devotion never faded. Something in her presence survives destruction. Further east, in the shadows of the Alps, lies the sanctuary of Einsiedeln in Switzerland. Its Black Madonna has drawn pilgrims since the 10th century. The story goes that Saint Meinrad, a hermit who lived in the forest there, was murdered by robbers. After his death, the site became a place of miracles. A chapel rose on the spot, and in it, the Black Madonna took her place. Her statue was darkened by candle smoke over centuries, but instead of restoring her to light, the monks left her as she was. The people had come to love her in black. They said her darkness was not the mark of soot, but of sanctity. Each of these sanctuaries tells the same story in different tongues. Whether she stands in stone, in wood, or in paint, the Black Madonna always attracts those who feel unseen. In Montserrat, she welcomes the wanderer. In Le Puy, she heals the broken. In Einsiedeln, she protects the forgotten. Across these lands, her shrines form a network of mystery, a hidden geography of devotion that stretches across time. If one were to draw them on a map, a pattern begins to emerge. Many of the oldest sites of the Black Madonna stand on places that were once sacred to older goddesses. Montserrat was once dedicated to Venus. Le Puy stood near a pagan site where the Celtic mother goddess was worshipped. In Poland, the shrine of Częstochowa, perhaps the most famous of all, occupies ground once revered by Slavic tribes. It is as if each Christian sanctuary was built upon the bones of a more ancient faith, and the Black Madonna became the bridge between the two worlds. Częstochowa's Black Madonna, known as Our Lady of Jasna Gora, holds a special place in the story. She is not only a spiritual figure, but a national symbol. Her image is said to have been painted by Saint Luke himself on a wooden board from the house of the Holy Family in Nazareth. Whether legend or truth, the painting's journey is extraordinary. It was carried from Jerusalem to Constantinople, from there to Ukraine, and finally to Poland in the 14th century. The monastery at Jasna Gora became a fortress of faith, surviving invasions and wars. During the Swedish deluge, when Poland faced destruction, the monks defended the shrine, and the Black Madonna was said to protect them. To this day, she is credited with saving the nation. Her face bears scars, 2 slashes on her right cheek, left by the sword of a thief who tried to steal her centuries ago. The legend says that every attempt to repair the wounds has failed. No paint could cover them. The scars remain visible, a mark of resilience and memory. To the Polish people, those scars became sacred. They see in her not only the Virgin Mother, but also the suffering of their homeland. She weeps with them, fights with them, endures with them. When pilgrims approach her, they often crawl on their knees through the long marble corridor that leads to her altar. Some carry rosaries, others photos of loved ones. Many arrive in silence, their eyes full of tears. When they finally see her face, framed in gold and shadow, something happens that cannot be explained by theology. They feel seen, they feel known. Her blackness, her wounds, her silence. They speak of a love that doesn't vanish when faith wavers. From Poland, the trail leads south again, to Italy, where the Black Madonna takes on yet another form. In Tindari, Sicily, she stands on a cliff overlooking the sea. The legend tells that a ship carrying her statue was caught in a storm and washed ashore there. When sailors tried to take her away, she became heavy as stone. Like Montserrat, she chose her place. Beneath her shrine lies a lagoon shaped like her profile, as if nature itself bowed to her presence. Each September, thousands gather to carry her through the streets in procession. They sing hymns that echo across the water, calling her the star of the sea, the mother who protects those who travel. In southern Italy, in Loreto, another story unfolds. There, the Holy House of Nazareth is said to have been miraculously transported by angels to save it from invaders. Inside that house stands another Black Madonna, Our Lady of Loreto, blackened by the smoke of centuries of devotion. For the faithful, her color has become a mark of authenticity, proof of her ancient origins. Her image has inspired artists, popes, and pilgrims alike. She is both mother and mystery, a link between heaven and earth carried by the wings of faith. To walk through these sanctuaries is to see how one symbol can unite entire nations. Each region has its language, its wars, its wounds, but the Black Madonna transcends them all. She stands as a reminder that the sacred cannot be confined to one form. She appears as black not to divide, but to include. Her color speaks to the universal, to the truth that divinity wears every face. The pilgrim's journey is more than geography. It is transformation. Those who set out to find her often find themselves instead. In every chapel, they face the same question whispered through stone corridors and mountain air. What is it that draws us to the dark? Perhaps it is the longing to feel that even in shadow there is presence, that the night does not mean absence, but nearness. The Black Madonna's shrines continue to pulse with this mystery. In an age of skepticism and speed, her quiet endurance feels almost miraculous. People still travel miles to stand before her, still light candles, still weep, still hope. Her silence has outlasted empires. Her darkness outshines light that fades. As the journey through sacred lands unfolds, one truth becomes clear. The Black Madonna is not bound to a single nation or creed. She is the traveler's companion, the exile's comfort, the forgotten one who remembers all. Her shrines may stand far apart, but they are connected by invisible threads of faith. And along those threads, through the centuries, her story continues to move like a river beneath the surface of history, quiet, deep, and unstoppable. To understand the mystery of the Black Madonna, one must look beyond the walls of cathedrals and step back into an age when the gods still walked among the trees. Long before Christianity took root in Europe, the continent was alive with sacred figures who bore the same symbols, gestures, and meanings that would later surround the Virgin Mary. Among them stood powerful goddesses: Isis of Egypt, Cybele of Phrygia, Artemis of Ephesus, each a mother, a protector, and a keeper of life and death. Their images, their rituals, and their temples would one day become the soil from which the Black Madonna would rise. The Church teaches that Mary was the mother of Jesus, the humble servant chosen by God to bear the divine into the world. Yet to many ancient peoples, her figure looked strangely familiar. In statues of the Black Madonna, she sits enthroned with a child on her lap, surrounded by stars, often crowned, her body radiating a still power. This image predates Christianity by centuries. The ancient Egyptian goddess Isis was often shown in exactly the same pose, nursing her son Horus. To the Egyptians, Isis was not only a mother, but the embodiment of wisdom, magic, and resurrection. Her worship spread across the Mediterranean, reaching Greece and Rome, and by the time of Christ, temples dedicated to Isis stood in every major city of the empire. When early Christians began to convert the Roman world, they found it impossible to erase her entirely. The devotion to the Divine Mother was too deeply rooted. Instead, the old forms were baptized into new meanings. The sacred child became Jesus. The Divine Mother became Mary. And yet something of the ancient power remained, especially in the darker images that appeared later in medieval Europe. The Black Madonna, with her solemn gaze and cosmic aura, feels less like the meek handmaid of the Gospels and more like the eternal mother of creation. Isis was called the Queen of Heaven, the Lady of the Sea, the Star of the Morning. Centuries later, Mary would bear the same titles. The continuity is striking, not as a matter of imitation, but as a reflection of humanity's enduring need for a maternal divinity. People needed a figure who could bridge the gap between the human and the divine, who could comfort the suffering and restore balance to a world of conflict. The face of that figure changed, but her essence endured. In Phrygia, the Great Mother was Cybele. She was worshipped in wild rituals filled with drums, music, and ecstatic dance. Her priests wore garments of both genders, for she transcended boundaries. Cybele represented the raw power of nature, the force that gives life and takes it away. Her shrines were often set in caves or mountains, symbols of the womb of the earth. When Christianity later built monasteries on those same mountains, it was often in places once sacred to her. Montserrat, in Spain, where the Black Madonna was found, had been a site of pagan worship long before the first monks arrived. The very mountain was believed to be alive, a manifestation of the goddess. The statue found in its cave was dark, as if carved from the rock itself. In Ephesus, the ancient city of Asia Minor, the goddess Artemis was revered as the Great Mother. Her temple was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. She was depicted not as a huntress, but as a many-breasted figure, a symbol of fertility and abundance. When Christianity came to Ephesus, it did not destroy her completely. Instead, the Church proclaimed that Mary, the mother of Jesus, had spent her last days there. The house where she was said to live became a place of pilgrimage, as it still is today. Once again, the sacred feminine endured under a new name. These transitions were not accidents of history. They reveal how deep the archetype of the mother goddess runs in the human psyche. The Church sought to define her within doctrine, to make her obedient, pure, and silent. But the people remembered the older truth. They remembered the mother who was also the earth, who could be both nurturing and terrifying, both light and darkness. In the Black Madonna, that truth re-emerged. She is Mary, yes, but she is also Isis, Cybele, Artemis, Demeter, and the countless unnamed goddesses who came before. The color black itself ties her to this ancient lineage. In the temples of Isis, statues were often made from black stone. Black was the color of the fertile Nile, of the life-giving soil, of mystery and power. In Egypt, black was not the color of death, but of regeneration. To paint a deity in black was to honor her creative strength. When medieval artists carved the Madonna in black, they may not have known this consciously, but something ancient guided their hands. Symbols do not die. They transform. Archaeologists and historians have found that many early Christian sites associated with the Black Madonna were built atop pre-Christian sanctuaries. In some cases, even the names remained similar. The Black Madonna of Einsiedeln stands where a shrine to the earth goddess once stood. The Madonna of Le Puy watches over a volcanic mountain that had been sacred to the Celtic mother of the gods. The continuity of place speaks of continuity of presence. It is as if the goddess refused to leave, changing only her face to survive. Of course, such connections were considered dangerous by church authorities. To link the Virgin Mary with pagan goddesses threatened the purity of Christian doctrine. The Church needed Mary to be human, submissive, and dependent upon divine grace, not a divine being in her own right. Any suggestion that she shared traits with the goddesses of old could open the door to heresy. And so the origins of the Black Madonna became a silence, a mystery wrapped in devotion, but rarely explained. Yet, among the people, the old associations lingered. Folk traditions often blended Christian and pagan beliefs without conflict. In rural villages, the Madonna was invoked for fertility, for good harvests, for protection of animals and crops. In processions, she was carried like the ancient goddesses once were, surrounded by flowers, incense, and song. The people did not need theological approval. Their faith was practical, visceral, and alive. They felt the divine in her blackness, in her strength, in her closeness to the earth. The Church tried to suppress certain rituals that seemed too pagan. Drums were banned in some Marian festivals. Dancing around her statue was forbidden. But such prohibitions only proved how deeply the ancient spirit persisted. In every generation, devotion found new forms. The Madonna might be given new clothes, new names, new prayers, but her essence could not be tamed. Scholars today debate the extent of this continuity. Some argue that the similarities between Mary and the old goddesses are coincidences of human imagination. Others see in them the clear line of spiritual evolution. But whether historical or symbolic, the connection speaks to something profound. The Black Madonna is not merely a Christian relic. She is a living memory of humanity's earliest attempts to understand creation through the image of the Mother. In that sense, her darkness becomes more than a color. It becomes the veil of continuity between faiths, between eras, between visions of the divine. Through her, we glimpse a world that once celebrated the feminine as sacred, not secondary. A world where divinity had the face of the Mother, where life and death were two sides of the same mystery. When pilgrims kneel before her today, few may know the names of Isis or Cybele, but they feel what those names once meant. They feel the same pull towards the eternal Mother, the same longing for protection and rebirth. In their prayers, the ancient and the modern merge. The forbidden origins whisper through candlelight, reminding us that faith is never entirely new. It is a river that carries its past beneath the surface, unseen yet ever present. The Black Madonna stands as proof that symbols can outlive empires. She embodies a lineage the Church could not erase, a truth too deep for doctrine to contain. Her silence hides not ignorance but memory, the memory of when humanity first called the divine by the name of Mother. And so the journey continues, from temples to cathedrals, from goddess to saint, from forgotten earth to holy altar. The names have changed, but the presence remains. In her blackness, the ancient Mother still waits, patient and powerful, watching over a world that has forgotten how often it has prayed to her before. Silence can be more powerful than denial. It can erase questions without answering them. The history of the Black Madonna is marked by such silence, a deliberate, unbroken pause that stretches across centuries. The Vatican, which has spoken on nearly every aspect of Christian doctrine, has never issued a clear explanation for the existence of the hundreds of dark-skinned Madonnas that adorn its churches and shrines. The official line remains quiet, and that quiet has become one of the most haunting mysteries of religious history. At first glance, it might seem like an oversight, a matter too small for papal attention. But the truth is more complex. The Black Madonna touches deep questions of theology, identity, and power. She stands at the intersection of race, symbolism, and faith, subjects that have divided nations and shaken empires. To acknowledge her fully would mean confronting not only history, but the very structure of how holiness has been portrayed for 2,000 years. The Church, from its earliest days, sought order. It inherited a chaotic world of beliefs, symbols, and local deities. To unify this world under one faith required boundaries. Doctrine had to define what was sacred and what was forbidden, what belonged to light and what to shadow. In this order, Mary became the ideal woman: pure, obedient, silent, and above all, white. The art of the Renaissance would later perfect this image: ivory skin, golden hair, serene expression, an aesthetic that matched the Church's vision of divine order. The Black Madonna did not fit this vision. She was something older, something untamed, something the Church could not easily explain. During the Middle Ages, when her cult began to spread, the Church's attitude toward her was ambiguous. Pilgrims flocked to her shrines, miracles were reported, and local bishops often endorsed her devotion. Yet theologians rarely mentioned her in their writings. No council debated her meaning. No pope proclaimed her as a special title. She was both embraced and ignored, celebrated by the people, but left unclassified by the institution. Her presence lived in the margins of faith, where mystery and devotion flourished beyond control. Why the silence? Part of the reason lies in the fear of her origins. As her images multiplied across Europe, scholars began to notice her resemblance to pagan goddesses. The Church had spent centuries erasing those figures, branding them as demons or myths. To admit that Mary's image might carry traces of Isis or Cybele would blur the boundary between Christianity and the faiths it replaced. It would suggest that the sacred feminine had persisted through the Church, rather than been defeated by it. For an institution built upon separation from the pagan world, that was a dangerous idea. Another reason was race. In medieval Europe, the color black was often associated with sin, evil, or the unknown. To worship a black figure as divine challenged these associations. It suggested that holiness could wear a face that the dominant culture had learned to fear or reject. The Black Madonna stood as an unspoken contradiction to the idea that light equals purity and dark equals corruption. Her very existence asked questions the Church preferred not to hear. By the Renaissance, when theology and art became instruments of power, the Church invested heavily in controlling its imagery. Painters and sculptors were commissioned to produce standardized representations of the Holy Family. These works reflected the idealized features of Europe's elite: pale skin, symmetrical beauty, regal poise. The Black Madonna, by contrast, looked ancient and foreign. She did not belong to the marble halls of Rome, but to the mountains, the caves, the villages. She was of the people, not of the hierarchy. To celebrate her publicly would mean honoring a version of the divine that was beyond the Church's control. The Vatican's silence was therefore strategic. It was easier to let devotion continue quietly than to risk controversy. Local bishops could permit her worship as long as it remained contained, untheologized, unpoliticized. The people could pray to her, sing to her, ask her for miracles, but they would never hear her mentioned in catechism. She was sacred, but unofficially so. The Church neither condemned nor canonized her mystery, and yet she endured. In times of crisis, when people felt abandoned by authority, they turned to her. During plagues, wars, and invasions, processions carrying her statues filled the streets. Her black face became a symbol of endurance, a presence that remained when all else failed. For many, she represented a side of faith that the Church's grandeur could not offer, a faith that understood suffering rather than denied it. Her silence mirrored the silence of God that people felt in their darkest hours. Even so, tensions occasionally flared. In some regions, clergy tried to replace her dark statues with lighter ones, claiming restoration or renovation as the reason. In others, her images were moved to side chapels or storage rooms, quietly removed from the center of worship. Yet each time, popular devotion brought her back. Communities restored her, rebuilt her, and kept her festivals alive. No decree could extinguish her presence. In the modern era, the silence became more awkward. As art historians and anthropologists began to study her, they uncovered connections the Church had long ignored. They found that many Black Madonnas occupied sites once sacred to older goddesses, and that their imagery reflected pre-Christian symbols of fertility and transformation. These discoveries reignited debates about the true nature of her origin. Some Catholics demanded explanations. Others warned that such speculation bordered on heresy. The Vatican, once again, said nothing. Silence, however, has its cost. In a world increasingly aware of racial injustice, the absence of acknowledgement began to feel like avoidance. The Black Madonna, with her dark skin and ancient power, could have been a bridge between faiths, between cultures, between color and divinity. Instead, her mystery remained locked in ritual and legend, unspoken in official discourse. Some saw this as humility, others as fear. Yet perhaps the Church's silence is not entirely suppression. In the realm of the sacred, silence can also be reverence. To define her would be to diminish her. To explain her would be to strip away her mystery. The Church, knowingly or not, allowed her to exist in a space beyond dogma. In that space, she became free, free to mean different things to different people, free to evolve as faith itself evolves. Her silence became her language. There is an irony in this. The Church that sought to control meaning may have preserved mystery instead. By refusing to define her, it ensured that she could not be confined. The Black Madonna survived precisely because no one ever decided what she was supposed to be. She became a mirror for those who approached her. To the poor, she was hope. To the scholar, she was history. To the mystic, she was revelation. To the oppressed, she was strength. Still, questions remain. Why are there so many? Why in so many countries? Why do so many share the same features? The dark skin, the solemn eyes, the child in her arms, the aura of power. The repetition cannot be coincidence. It suggests a pattern, an intention, perhaps even a memory. Some theologians have quietly suggested that the Black Madonna might represent the earliest vision of Mary, before cultural whitening reshaped her image. If Jesus was born in the Middle East, if Mary was of that land, her skin would have been dark. In that case, the Black Madonna is not an anomaly at all. She is the original. But such a truth would be too disruptive to centuries of sacred art and theology. It would challenge not only aesthetics, but power itself. It would mean that the Divine Mother venerated in Europe was never European. It would mean that holiness has always been darker than history has allowed it to appear. And so the silence continues. The Vatican issues no statements, no denials, no affirmations. The statues remain, quietly watched over by candles and pilgrims. Each generation comes to her and asks the same unspoken question, "Who are you?" And each time, the answer comes not in words but in presence. The Church remains silent, but she does not. For perhaps the silence is her choice as well. Perhaps she, too, has no need to explain herself to the powers of the world. The Black Madonna stands in her mystery, as she always has, as she always will. The Church may withhold its voice, but her black gaze speaks for itself. It says that faith is larger than doctrine, that love is older than theology, and that the divine can wear any color it chooses. Faith often begins where explanation ends. The story of the Black Madonna is not sustained by doctrine or decrees, but by miracles. Her legend survives because people have witnessed what they cannot rationally deny. From the Pyrenees to the Alps, from the forests of Poland to the cathedrals of Italy, her presence has been marked by acts of healing, deliverance, and wonder. These miracles, whether spiritual or physical, have transformed her from an image into an experience. They have made her not just a statue to behold, but a force to encounter. One of the earliest recorded miracles took place in Le Puy, France, in the 5th century. According to tradition, a woman suffering from paralysis climbed the steep hill to the site where the Black Madonna's shrine now stands. When she reached the top, she was able to stand and walk without pain. The bishop who witnessed the event declared the site sacred, and the first chapel was built in her honor. Over the centuries, Le Puy became a major pilgrimage destination, drawing kings, crusaders, and commoners alike. The Virgin's dark face became a symbol of renewal for those who sought divine mercy in the midst of suffering. Similar stories appeared elsewhere. In Einsiedeln, Switzerland, her statue was said to have been blessed by Christ himself in a miraculous vision witnessed by monks in the 10th century. The event turned the monastery into one of Europe's most visited sanctuaries. In Częstochowa, Poland, her image, now known as the Black Madonna of Jasna Gora, became the heart of national faith. When the Swedish army invaded in the 17th century, legend tells that her intercession turned the tide of battle, saving the monastery from destruction. To this day, Polish pilgrims speak of her not only as a mother of mercy, but as the queen of their nation. Her miracles often occur during times of despair. She appears not in comfort, but in crisis. Plague, famine, war, invasion. Whenever the world collapses, stories of her intervention arise. During the Black Death, processions carrying her images moved through towns as people begged her to spare them. During the Napoleonic Wars, soldiers carried her medals into battle. During the Second World War, her statues were hidden from bombs. Yet when found intact amid the ruins, people believed it was her hand that had shielded them. But her miracles are not always about grand historical events. Many belong to the quiet realm of personal transformation. A mother prays for her child's recovery and finds healing beyond the reach of medicine. A farmer prays for rain and watches clouds gather over his barren field. A prisoner dreams of her dark face and wakes to news of his release. These stories rarely make it into official church records, yet they form the living soul of her devotion. For each person touched by her presence, the Black Madonna becomes real, not as an icon of theology, but as a mother who answers. Mystics throughout history have also felt drawn to her. To them, she is not merely a source of miracles, but a gateway into divine mystery. In the writings of medieval visionaries like Hildegard of Bingen and Mechthild of Magdeburg, one finds echoes of the sacred feminine, the dark radiance of God that transcends gender and form. Though they never named her directly, their visions describe a divine darkness that nourishes rather than destroys. To mystics, this darkness is not absence, but fullness, a womb of creation. The Black Madonna embodies that paradox, the dark that gives birth to light. For some, her miracles are not supernatural events, but psychological awakenings. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, saw in her a symbol of the dark feminine, the hidden counterpart of reason and order. He believed that modern humanity, obsessed with light and progress, had forgotten the wisdom of darkness. The Black Madonna, he argued, calls us to integrate the shadow, to accept the unknown within ourselves. Her miracles, in that sense, are acts of wholeness, moments when individuals rediscover balance between light and dark, faith and doubt, body and spirit. Yet others insist that her power is tangible, not metaphorical. In sanctuaries where she is venerated, visitors often describe a palpable energy, a stillness that feels alive, a presence that cannot be explained by architecture or atmosphere. Scientists might call it suggestion or coincidence, but to the faithful, it is her spirit. Some claim to see light emanating from her eyes. Others speak of scents of roses or myrrh filling the air when prayers are answered. Pilgrims leave behind crutches, bandages, and photographs as tokens of gratitude. Each object is a story of encounter, each candle a whisper of thanks. Her miracles often defy hierarchy. They happen without priests, without permission, without explanation. They remind believers that divine grace cannot be monopolized. In a world where the Church once mediated every path to God, the Black Madonna offered a direct connection. She listened to the poor, the excluded, the ones who had no voice. In her presence, no one was unworthy. Her blackness became a sign that holiness could dwell outside the boundaries of purity as defined by power. Many anthropologists note that her miracles echo ancient rituals. The act of pilgrimage, the offering of candles, the songs sung in her honor, all resemble practices once dedicated to earth goddesses and fertility deities. In these traditions, miracles were not violations of nature, but expressions of harmony with it. The divine intervened not by breaking the world's order, but by restoring its balance. The Black Madonna's miracles follow the same rhythm. They are less about spectacle and more about restoration. She heals what is broken, reconnects what is divided, reconciles the human with the divine. Her connection to nature is particularly strong. Many of her shrines are located in caves, mountains, or near springs, places that ancient peoples regarded as sacred. Pilgrims describe these sites as breathing with presence, as though the land itself participates in her worship. In such places, the boundary between earth and heaven feels thin. Her miracles often involve weather, fertility, or renewal, suggesting that she mediates between humanity and creation itself. This link to the natural world makes her devotion especially powerful in an age of environmental crisis. To many modern pilgrims, she is not only the Mother of God, but the Mother of the Earth. In the 20th century, new forms of mysticism emerged around her. Artists, writers, and seekers began to reinterpret her image beyond the confines of Catholic devotion. To Black theologians in America, she became a symbol of resistance, a divine affirmation of Black dignity. To feminists, she represented the suppressed feminine voice in religion. To spiritual seekers, she embodied the unity of opposites, light and dark, male and female, life and death. Her miracles, they said, were not only in healing bodies, but in healing consciousness. The Vatican continued its silence, but pilgrims multiplied. In the modern era, millions still visit her shrines each year. Scientists photograph her icons, theologians debate her symbolism, but the faithful still come with candles and tears. They kneel before her, touch her robe, and leave believing that something within them has changed. Whether by divine intervention or by the mystery of faith itself, transformation occurs. And in that transformation lies the heart of her power. Miracles, after all, are not proof, but participation. They are the bridge between the visible and the invisible. The Black Madonna's miracles invite not belief in magic, but trust in mystery. They remind humanity that there are dimensions of existence beyond reason's reach. In her silence, she speaks of a truth too vast for words. Her miracles are her language, her way of reminding us that the divine is not distant but intimate, not pure light but living darkness that holds creation in its arms. Her mysticism, unlike dogma, cannot be codified. It is a movement of the soul, a rhythm of transformation. Wherever she appears, faith takes on the shape of mystery again. People rediscover the sacred not as a rule, but as a relationship. And in that rediscovery, perhaps, lies the greatest miracle of all. Symbols are the language of the sacred. They speak where words fail, reaching into places that logic cannot touch. The Black Madonna is one of those symbols whose meaning stretches far beyond religion. Her dark face has carried the weight of centuries of interpretation, devotion, and silence. It has absorbed the fears, desires, and questions of every generation that has looked upon it. To understand her, one must look beyond the surface of color and into the deep field of symbolism that her image evokes. In the Western imagination, the color black has long carried contradictory meanings. It is the color of mourning and sin, yet also of fertility and potential. In the natural world, black soil is the richest, the most capable of sustaining life. Seeds germinate in darkness before rising into the light. Night is the time when the earth rests, when dreams and conception take place. The womb is dark, yet from it emerges every form of light. The Black Madonna embodies all of these paradoxes. She is not the negation of light, but its source, the hidden matrix from which illumination is born. To ancient cultures, blackness was sacred long before Christianity existed. In Egypt, Isis was sometimes portrayed with dark skin, symbolizing her connection to the fertile Nile and the mysteries of rebirth. In Mesopotamia, the goddess Inanna descended into the underworld and returned transformed, carrying wisdom from the depths. In pre-Christian Europe, the Mother Earth figure was often represented as dark or earthen in tone, her color symbolizing the fertile ground. The Black Madonna inherits this archetypal lineage. Her darkness is not an accident, but an inheritance from the ancient feminine divine, a visual memory of a time when darkness wasn't feared, but revered. Christian theology, however, redefined these associations. The binary of light and dark became moralized, light as good, dark as evil. This dualism shaped art, politics, and even identity. Within such a system, the Black Madonna stands as a quiet rebellion. She reclaims the sacredness of darkness and restores balance to the spiritual spectrum. She reminds believers that divinity is not one color, but all colors combined, that the mystery of God contains both radiance and shadow. Her blackness can also be read as the color of transformation. Alchemists called it nigredo, the stage of purification through darkness. Before gold could be created, the material had to pass through decay, dissolution, and night. Nigredo was not destruction, but preparation, the necessary passage before rebirth. The Black Madonna, seen through this lens, represents the spiritual alchemy of the soul. To approach her is to confront one's own shadows, to enter the darkness of the self in order to emerge renewed. Her image teaches that enlightenment is not escape from darkness, but the fruit of embracing it. Art historians have often tried to explain her color through material causes: smoke, oxidation, age. But even if such explanations were true for some statues, they cannot account for the consistency of her symbolism. Across Europe, from Spain to Poland, from France to Italy, the Black Madonna bears the same features: a solemn face, dark skin, and a child in her arms. This repetition suggests intention. It is as if generations of artists, consciously or not, were transmitting a code. Her darkness was not a flaw to be corrected, but a truth to be preserved. The child she holds is another key to her symbolism. In many depictions, the infant Jesus shares her dark hue, suggesting unity rather than contrast. The child represents light, the mother darkness, yet both are one. Together they form a sacred paradox: light born of darkness, God born of woman, spirit born of matter. The Black Madonna reveals that creation itself is an act of union between opposites. Her color speaks to the mystery that divinity is not only transcendent, but incarnate, not only pure, but embodied. Some scholars have suggested that her blackness is also a reflection of hidden power. In medieval symbolism, black was associated with secrecy, with the hidden chamber where divine mysteries were kept. Monks wrote of the cloud of unknowing, the darkness in which the soul encounters God beyond comprehension. The Black Madonna embodies this mystical darkness. To look upon her is to look into the unknown, to accept that the sacred cannot be fully seen or explained. She invites believers into contemplation, into the fertile void where words fall silent and presence remains. Her color also carries historical resonance. In an age when European art increasingly idealized whiteness, the Black Madonna stood as a counter-image, a visual reminder of the faith's Middle Eastern roots. She whispers of origins the Church preferred to forget: that Mary was a woman of the Levant, that the divine story began in lands of sun and sand, not marble and snow. Her darkness thus becomes a testament to truth, a silent correction to centuries of cultural revision. Yet beyond race or geography, her symbolism touches the deepest layers of the psyche. Jungian psychology interprets her as the archetype of the dark mother, the aspect of the feminine that embraces death and transformation as part of life's cycle. She is the keeper of thresholds, the guardian of the inner journey. In dreams and myths, such figures often appear at moments of crisis, when the old self must die so that a new one may be born. The Black Madonna's presence in history mirrors this pattern. She emerges in times of cultural and spiritual collapse, calling humanity to renewal through confrontation with shadow. Her symbolism extends to the political as well. In colonized or oppressed societies, the Black Madonna has often been adopted as a symbol of liberation. Her dark skin identifies her with the marginalized, the forgotten, the voiceless. In Latin America, where indigenous and African traditions merged with Christianity, her image took on revolutionary significance. She became the mother of the oppressed, the protector of those who suffered under empire. In this sense, her blackness becomes not only sacred but subversive, a challenge to systems that equate divinity with power and whiteness. The artistic expressions surrounding her also carry layers of meaning. In many statues, she is adorned with gold crowns and jeweled robes, a striking contrast to her dark skin. The combination of gold and black evokes the union of sun and night, spirit and matter, divinity and humanity. Gold, in alchemical symbolism, represents perfection. Black represents the beginning, the prima materia. Together they signify the complete cycle of creation. The Black Madonna's appearance is thus an image of cosmic harmony, a reminder that the sacred encompasses both the heights of heaven and the depths of earth. Even her silence is symbolic. She does not speak in scripture or prophecy, yet her presence commands reverence. Silence, in mystical tradition, is the language of the divine feminine. It is through silence that wisdom is gestated. The Black Madonna's silence is not absence but fullness, the pregnant stillness before revelation. She stands as an icon of contemplation in a world addicted to noise. Those who approach her in prayer often describe an enveloping quiet, as if the air itself listens. In that silence, the seeker hears their own soul reflected back. Her symbolism also resonates with modern understandings of psychology and spirituality. In a time when light is often equated with positivity and darkness with negativity, the Black Madonna reminds humanity that growth requires both. To deny darkness is to deny half of existence. Her image invites balance, integration, and humility. She teaches that healing begins not by fleeing the shadow, but by acknowledging it. She is the sacred yes to the fullness of being. In literature and art, she continues to inspire reinterpretation. Poets write of her as the mother of night. Painters depict her emerging from cosmic depths. Musicians compose hymns that blend ancient and modern sounds. Each new expression reveals another facet of her meaning. She is inexhaustible because she is not fixed. She is the archetype of mystery itself. Perhaps the most profound symbolism of the Black Madonna lies in her endurance. Through centuries of cultural change, her image has never disappeared. Empires rose and fell, dogmas shifted, aesthetics evolved, yet she remained. Her color, her stillness, her gaze, all unchanged. She is the shadow that history cannot erase, the reminder that beneath every civilization's pursuit of purity lies the fertile darkness of origin. The Black Madonna, in all her hidden symbolism, stands as a testament to paradox. She is darkness that reveals, silence that speaks, matter that sanctifies spirit. To gaze upon her is to confront one's own complexity. Her image does not demand understanding but reverence. She does not explain the mystery, she embodies it. And perhaps that is her deepest message, that the divine is not meant to be simplified, that truth wears many faces, and that the holy often hides in the places we least expect to find it. The 20th century was an age of revelation and forgetting, of rediscovery and denial. In this paradoxical age, when science reached the stars and war scarred the earth, the image of the Black Madonna began to re-emerge with new meaning. For centuries, she had been hidden in chapels and whispered about in pilgrimage songs, her mystery confined to rural devotion. But as the world entered modernity, her silence began to speak again. She was no longer just a relic of medieval faith. She became a mirror for the anxieties, hopes, and awakenings of a changing humanity. The rediscovery began quietly. In the early decades of the century, scholars and travelers rediscovered forgotten shrines and ancient icons. Archaeologists catalogued statues that had survived revolutions and wars. Art historians noticed the peculiar pattern, the same dark-skinned virgin appearing across nations, cultures, and centuries. What had once been dismissed as smoke damage or accident now appeared intentional. The question of her origin returned, sharper than before. Who had carved these faces? Why were they black? Why had the Church remained silent? As Europe rebuilt itself after the First World War, the Black Madonna became a symbol of endurance. In the ruins of faith and civilization, her image stood as a reminder of what could not be destroyed. Pilgrimages resumed, and poets wrote of her as the mother who survives every collapse. To many, she represented not dogma, but resilience. Her darkness seemed to absorb the grief of the world and turn it into quiet strength. In Poland, during the Second World War, the Black Madonna of Jasna Góra became the soul of resistance. Her image was carried in secret during Nazi occupation, a sign of hope in a time of terror. When the war ended, she became a national emblem once more. To Poles, she was no longer only a religious figure, but a symbol of identity, the embodiment of a faith that could not be conquered. Her image appeared on banners, in songs, in the private prayers of those who had lost everything. The Black Madonna became not only the Queen of Poland, but the keeper of memory itself. In Western Europe, where faith had waned, artists and intellectuals rediscovered her through symbolism and psychology. Carl Jung's writings on the dark feminine inspired a new interpretation of her image. She was seen as a symbol of the collective unconscious, the hidden side of the divine that modernity had forgotten. To Jungians, her darkness was not a threat, but an invitation. She called humanity to reintegrate the shadow, to restore balance between reason and mystery. In this interpretation, the Black Madonna became a psychological necessity, a healing archetype for an age wounded by alienation. Meanwhile, in the Americas and Africa, her rediscovery took on a different tone. As movements for civil rights and decolonization grew, the Black Madonna became a symbol of liberation. In Latin America, she merged with indigenous and African traditions, appearing as a mother of justice and rebellion. Her image was carried during protests, painted on walls, worn as a pendant by those who fought against oppression. She stood beside the poor, the displaced, the silenced. Her dark skin spoke of dignity in the face of racism, of divinity within blackness itself. In the United States, Black theologians and artists began to reclaim her image as a counterpoint to the Eurocentric portrayals of the Virgin Mary. Churches displayed her icon as a statement of inclusion and historical truth. She appeared in sermons, poetry, and gospel music. The Black Madonna became both sacred and political, uniting the struggle for racial equality with the spiritual hunger for representation. In her, Believers saw the Divine Mother who understood suffering, who shared the color and pain of her children. The feminist movement of the 1960s and 70s brought another wave of rediscovery. Women searching for the lost feminine in religion found her waiting in the shadows of cathedrals. They saw in her not submission, but sovereignty, not silence, but strength. The Black Madonna became an emblem of the sacred feminine that patriarchy had suppressed. Her darkness symbolized depth, intuition, and creation, the aspects of divinity ignored in a world ruled by logic and hierarchy. Spiritual writers began to call her the Great Mother, the dark womb of wisdom that births renewal. Retreats, rituals, and prayers dedicated to her multiplied across Europe and America. At the same time, the academic world began to take her seriously. Anthropologists traced her shrines to prehistoric goddess sites. Art historians analyzed her stylistic continuity across centuries. Theologians debated whether her color held doctrinal meaning or cultural symbolism. Conferences and publications proliferated, each offering new interpretations. Some saw her as the Christian transformation of ancient fertility cults. Others as a mystical expression of the divine mystery beyond all dualities. Yet no theory could exhaust her meaning. She remained, as always, the silence at the heart of devotion. By the late 20th century, the Black Madonna had entered popular culture. Her image appeared in films, novels, and songs. Writers like Umberto Eco and Jean-Claude Bologne explored her as a cipher for forbidden knowledge. Musicians composed hymns blending sacred and secular tones. Tourists visited her shrines not only for faith, but for fascination. Yet even in this age of exposure, her mystery deepened. The more she was studied, the less she could be contained. The rise of global spirituality in the 21st century gave her new life once again. In an age disillusioned with institutions but hungry for meaning, the Black Madonna offered something rare, a symbol that united the ancient and the modern, the mystical and the real. She crossed boundaries of religion, culture, and color. In yoga studios, meditation centers, and interfaith gatherings, her image appeared as a universal mother. Some saw her as Mary, others saw her as Gaia, Kali, or Isis reborn. She became the emblem of the feminine divine in a world seeking balance after centuries of masculine domination. Her shrines, too, changed with the times. At Montserrat, at Czestochowa, at Rocamadour, pilgrims now arrive not only with rosaries but with cameras and questions. They come from every corner of the world. Catholics, Buddhists, agnostics, seekers, each drawn by something they cannot name. The air around her altars still hums with the same ancient reverence. Candles flicker against her dark face. Silence gathers, dense and warm. In that silence, the modern pilgrim senses continuity, the unbroken thread of devotion that has survived 1,000 years. Digital media has made her story global. Documentaries explore her mystery. Online communities share testimonies of healing and transformation. Artists reinterpret her with contemporary aesthetics, blending tradition with technology. Yet the essence remains unchanged. Whether carved in wood or projected on a screen, the Black Madonna still radiates the same paradoxical grace, an invitation to see divinity where the world sees shadow. For many, her return feels inevitable. The modern world, weary of light without depth, yearns for darkness that nourishes rather than terrifies. The Black Madonna offers that balance. She embodies a spirituality that does not flee from suffering, but finds wisdom within it. Her rediscovery marks not a return to superstition, but a reconciliation with mystery. In her, modern seekers find what technology and progress cannot provide: the presence of something eternal, compassionate, and profoundly human. Even within the Catholic Church, quiet shifts have occurred. While official statements remain scarce, popes and theologians have acknowledged her cultural and spiritual importance. Pilgrimages to her shrines are encouraged. Her image has appeared in Vatican exhibitions, not as anomaly, but as heritage. The silence remains, but it has softened. The Church that once avoided her now preserves her as part of its living memory. Her modern rediscovery reveals a simple truth. The Black Madonna never disappeared. She was only waiting for humanity to see her again. Every era must rediscover her in its own language. To the medieval peasant, she was miracle and protection. To the mystic, she was the darkness of God. To the revolutionary, she was justice. To the modern seeker, she is balance. Her meaning shifts, yet her essence endures. In this rediscovery lies a deeper pattern, the rhythm of revelation and forgetting that defines all sacred history. Humanity moves in cycles, turning away from mystery, then returning when the light grows thin. The Black Madonna is the guardian of that return. Each generation, she calls us back to what was lost, reverence for the unseen, humility before the dark, faith in the hidden wholeness of the world. In her presence, the modern mind rediscovers something ancient. Beneath the noise of progress, beneath the glare of endless illumination, lies the same silence that has always surrounded her. It is the silence of origin, of creation, of love that does not need explanation. The rediscovery of the Black Madonna is not an event of the past, but an awakening that continues. It is the recognition that what humanity seeks in the stars has always been found in the shadow of the sacred. The story of the Black Madonna does not end with discovery or explanation. It ends where it began, in silence. Not the silence of ignorance or neglect, but the silence of mystery. The same silence that fills ancient cathedrals at dawn, when the light has not yet broken through the stained glass, and the world holds its breath. That silence is her language. It is the language of a truth too vast for words, too old for doctrine, too intimate for debate. When we look upon her face, we are not only seeing a relic of faith, but the reflection of our own history. Her darkness carries the memory of every civilization that has risen and fallen in the search for meaning. Within her gaze lie the traces of Africa, the whispers of the Middle East, the prayers of Europe. Her image is a convergence point where myth and history touch, where divine and human meet. To understand her is not to solve her mystery, but to be transformed by it. Through centuries of silence, she has taught without speaking. Empires have come and gone. Theologies have shifted. Languages have died. Yet she remains. Her constancy is not in her form, but in her presence. She has been painted, carved, and crowned in 1,000 ways, yet she remains the same, the mother of all who seek, the guardian of all who suffer. Her face of darkness is the reminder that divinity dwells not only in light, but in the shadow that gives light its meaning. The Vatican's silence, often seen as evasion, may in truth be recognition. Perhaps the Church has always known that she cannot be explained without unraveling something fundamental about itself. To speak too clearly of her might be to reveal that faith itself was born from the meeting of many worlds, that the Virgin of Nazareth carries within her the echoes of goddesses long before Bethlehem, that the divine feminine never truly disappeared but took refuge in her. The silence, then, is both protection and reverence. It guards a truth that language would only diminish. In every generation, there are those who try to define her. Some call her an accident of history, a relic of paganism baptized by Christianity. Others call her the truest image of Mary, untouched by the whitening of Western art. Yet every theory fails because the Black Madonna is not a theory. She is an experience. To stand before her is to confront something beyond intellect, a mystery that reveals itself not through reason, but through resonance. She awakens something ancestral within the human heart, something that remembers when the sacred was not separate from the earth, when the divine was not divided by color, gender, or creed. Those who kneel before her in Montserrat, in Czestochowa, in Tindari, or in the caves of Rocamadour do not come seeking answers. They come seeking presence. They light candles not to understand her, but to be seen by her. In the shimmer of those flames, centuries dissolve. The pilgrim of the Middle Ages and the traveler of today stand side by side, bound by the same unspoken recognition. The world changes, but the need for the sacred endures. The Black Madonna waits, patient and eternal, as if reminding humanity that the divine is not far away, but hidden within the very darkness we fear. Her silence is not emptiness. It is fullness beyond words. In that silence, the cries of history find rest, the wounds of race, the fractures of faith, the exile of the feminine, all are gathered into her darkness, not erased, but held. She does not erase suffering. She absorbs it, transfigures it, and returns it as compassion. That is her power. That is why she has survived every attempt to redefine or forget her. Modern pilgrims who stand before her often describe a strange stillness. They speak of feeling both small and infinite, humbled and comforted. They may not believe in miracles, yet they leave changed. The rational mind cannot measure such experiences, but the soul recognizes them. The Black Madonna is not a relic of superstition. She is the threshold between the visible and the invisible. She stands as witness to humanity's endless hunger for meaning and as reminder that what we fear in the dark may be what we most need to remember. Across time, the same pattern repeats. When civilizations reach the height of their light, they begin to forget the dark. When reason grows too loud, mystery retreats. But it never disappears. It waits. And when the world grows cold and fragmented, when people tire of explanations and yearn for depth, the Black Madonna rises again. Not to restore the past, but to remind us that wholeness lies in the union of opposites. Her silence is the sound of balance returning. There are those who claim to have heard her speak, not with words, but through events, coincidences, awakenings. They describe her presence as both maternal and cosmic. She comforts like a mother, yet commands like the universe. In her, personal and eternal converge. Whether or not these testimonies are true is irrelevant. What matters is the transformation they reveal. The Black Madonna does not demand belief. She evokes remembrance. She invites us to remember the sacred that exists beyond all boundaries. As the world moves deeper into the 21st century, her relevance grows. The crises of our age, environmental, spiritual, existential, mirror the ancient tensions between light and dark. Humanity, having worshipped progress and clarity, now faces the consequences of imbalance. The Black Madonna stands as counterpoint, as teacher. She does not condemn the light, but restores its context. Without the dark, there can be no dawn. Without silence, no song. Without mystery, no meaning. Her message is not one of opposition, but of integration. Perhaps that is why she endures when so many icons fade. She embodies what humanity most needs to remember, that the divine is not elsewhere but here, in the flesh, in the soil, in the shadow. Her face reminds us that holiness does not require perfection, but presence. She stands as the black mirror in which creation recognizes itself, imperfect, beautiful, whole. At the end of this journey, we find not an answer, but a return. The same silence that began her story remains. It is the silence of the cosmos before the first word, the silence that holds the breath of every prayer. The Vatican's silence, the scholar's silence, the pilgrim's silence, all are echoes of hers. It is not a silence of absence, but of awe. It is the silence that says the mystery is real, and that to name it would be to break it. So the Black Madonna continues to watch. In her darkness, she keeps the world's forgotten prayers. She gathers the sorrows of the living and the whispers of the dead. She is not waiting to be explained. She is waiting to be seen, truly seen beyond the fear of shadow and the worship of light. When we look upon her face, perhaps what we are really seeing is ourselves, the part that has endured through every age, the soul that remembers both suffering and grace. Her silence is our silence. Her endurance is our story, and as long as humanity seeks the divine, her eyes will remain open, steady, and compassionate, reflecting both the darkness we flee and the light we hope to find. The Black Madonna is not a chapter of history. She is the history itself, written in shadow, carried through centuries, still alive in every act of faith that defies despair. The silence that surrounds her is not the end of the story. It is the eternal breath between creation and revelation. And when the last candle burns low and the voices fade, her image remains. In that enduring presence, we understand what the Vatican could not say, what scholars could not prove, what pilgrims have always known. The Black Madonna is the mystery itself, the silence from which all stories are born, and to which all must one day return. The story of the Black Madonna fades not with an ending, but with a whisper. The candlelight trembles, the echo of prayer fades into the stone, and once again the silence returns. Yet somewhere within that silence, a truth continues to breathe. It waits for those who dare to look beyond what history allows, for those who sense that the forbidden often hides the most sacred of all. If you have followed this journey into the heart of mystery, you have felt it too. The weight of centuries pressing softly against the present, the pulse of something ancient that refuses to die. These stories are not relics, they are living echoes, pieces of a truth buried beneath time and power. And here, on Forbidden Lore, we bring them to light again. Every week, we descend into the forgotten corners of history. We uncover the tales the world chose to silence, the relics the church locked away, the myths that once shaped the soul of humanity. Not to accuse, not to sensationalize, but to remember, to remind ourselves that knowledge once forbidden can set the spirit free. If this story has stirred something within you, if you felt the presence of that silence or the question that never leaves, then join us. Subscribe to Forbidden Lore. Let your curiosity be your compass. Turn on the bell so you never miss the next revelation. Like this video if it spoke to you. Share it with those who walk the same path of wonder. Each story we tell grows stronger when it is remembered, and you are part of that remembering. The light fades, but the story does not end here. In the shadows, another truth waits to be found, another secret to be uncovered. When the next chapter calls, will you follow it? This has been Forbidden Lore, where silence speaks and history remembers.